Our position today is the Tamil political question should be resolved through a referendum. And when we call for a referendum, we are not simply saying a yes or no vote for a Tamil Eelam or not. We are based on inclusivity, based on pluralism. We are willing to give a multiple choice, whether it can be an independent state or be a federal state or 13th Amendment. So with respect to referendum, even though if we have a historical analysis, since French Revolution, on May 22nd, 1799, the French Constituent Assembly passed a resolution calling that they will annex any territory only with the consent of the people. Similarly, in Italy, also Napoleon initially opposed to that position, but later he also subscribed to that position, but it's partly due to a bribe paid to Napoleon that by giving 2 other cities, he allowed to have a referendum in Sardinia. During the First World War, Woodrow Wilson made a declaration that only through a plebiscite only a particular territory's political fate will be determined. So based on that, what we are asking today is nothing new. And the question then arises, who will conduct the referendum? But if you look at many of the peace agreements between the government and the other party, the governments eventually say that the eventual resolution should be based on referendum. In those circumstances, such as the government conducts the referendum. Now, the issue before the international community is the political destiny of Northern Ireland. Because the Good Friday Agreement says at the end of the period, there should be a referendum to decide the political fate of referendum. So now everybody hopes that there will be a referendum to allow the Northern Ireland people to decide their political destiny, whether they want to remain as part of UK or they want to join Ireland. One of the reasons people normally say that it is not, these are all European-centric political initiative. It is not applicable in our area in the South Asia. Specifically, they mentioned the Kashmiri situation. Actually, interestingly, the first UN resolution on plebiscite was the Kashmiri resolution in 1948. UN passed, a Security Council passed a resolution that the Kashmiri people's political fate should be resolved through a referendum, and both India and Pakistan agreed to that. In 1952, Jawaharlal Nehru, addressing the Indian Parliament, he's mentioned that they don't consider that resolution as a legal obligation binding on them, but on the basis of morality. Jawaharlal Nehru said that we will conduct a referendum to allow the Kashmiri people to decide their political fate. But thus far, India has not held a referendum in Kashmir. But the reason for that, from India perspective, because of their security problem. Because they are saying there's a hostility still going on in Kashmir between India and Pakistan. So once the hostility ceases, then only they will conduct the referendum or they will talk about referendum. So we cannot compare a referendum, the Kashmiri situation with our situation. Is entirely different. And also the other question, normally people say that, okay, the Sri Lankan government will never allow to have a referendum. We are not asking the Sri Lankan government to hold a referendum. We don't ask anything from the Sri Lankan government. That one of our policy decision of the TGTE from day one. Don't go in front of the Sri Lankan embassy and demonstrate. No, we are not going to ask justice from the Sri Lankan government. They don't have any right to give also to give anything, because we don't accept them as a de jure, as a legitimate government of the Tamil people, because as you all know that we never participated or consented to the 1972 constitution or the subsequent 1978 constitution. For us, the government in Colombo is an illegitimate government. They do not have any de jure authority to rule us. So we leave that aside. But sometimes it's possible the Sri Lankan government might also conduct a referendum. Because in India, we look at the Indonesia East Timor referendum. Initially, East Timor opposed Indonesia opposed the East Timorian referendum. Then they had an economic crisis like what Sri Lanka is having now. There was a change of government in Indonesia, similar to the Sri Lankan situation. And when the new president came to power, then he said, okay, we'll allow the East Timorese to have a referendum. Similarly, if you look at the South Sudan, then there was a threat that the Bashir may be taken to the ICC. So in order to avoid that, he agreed to have a referendum. So that's a possibility. We are not ruling it out. There's a possibility Sri Lankan government may be forced to have a referendum. But we are not banking on that. Our position is the referendum should be an internationally monitored with the international participation. That's our position. And also, as I mentioned earlier, maybe I think I must have mentioned in Tamil, when you take at Kosovo in 1991, September 26, the Kosovo, the exiled government of Kosovo asked the people back home to have a referendum. So the civil society and the people, they themselves organized that referendum. That referendum is still considered as a valid referendum. Then in 2008, Kosovo declared a issued a unilateral declaration of independence. Then Serbia said, okay, no, just go, we'll send it to the International Court of Justice to see whether it is a lawful exercise, whether it can they do a unilateral declaration of independence without, in other words, without the consent of the Serbian government. The court said that there's nothing in international law that says they cannot do it, but at the same time, nothing in international law says that they can do it. So given that, they say what the Kosovo's unilateral declaration is not against international law. But the most interesting thing I would like to point out, in that opinion, the International Court of Opinion noted that this declaration or this referendum were not conducted either by Serbia or by the United Nations. It was conducted, the referendum was conducted, and the subsequent declaration was made by the leaders, the representatives of the people with the participation of civil society. So we can do that also. So but what we need now, so the other issue is the 1977 election. That election was, at that time, the TGTE said that election was a referendum. They say, ask the people to vote. If you want Eelam, you vote for us. So there was a referendum in 1977. Then in 2010, the diaspora conducted the referendum. So the question is, given these two referendums, why you need another referendum? Our position is that, but both those referendums, there was no international participation. We want to have some kind of international participation or some kind of an international attention to get legitimacy for referendum. So that's why we are calling. But most importantly, we consider this referendum as a strategy, to realize our dream of Tamil Eelam, our political destination. We are 100%, we are positive. If people are given a choice, if people are given free choice, they will definitely vote for Tamil Eelam. It has been, we had some mock referendums in US, in Sweden, in Denmark, in France, and more than 90% of the people voted for referendum. So the call of the hour is that we ourselves, the people, we ourselves should tell the international community, this is what we want. That is the call of the hour. Thank you. Tamilirin Talavidhi, Tamilirin Kaiyil, Tamilirin Taham, Tamilila Tayam.